All right, so I'm going to talk briefly about a couple of concepts, what we call immersive journalism and what we call volumetric VR. So pretty straightforward. Immersive journalism is essentially using some of these tools that Dan just showed us to tell news and documentary stories. How do we apply these technological breakthroughs to find a new way of communicating the news, right? Volumetric VR, most of the clever or funny things I say today are borrowed from Dan, just so you know. So that's volumetric VR. I use that in contrast to 360 video. So 360 video, you essentially have, as he said, the fishbowl on your head. You can see all around you, up and down, but you can't alter your orientation inside the scene. With volumetric, which we also sometimes call walk-around VR, we put you in a computer-generated space where you can move around, and that increases your sense of immersion and interaction, and we think makes for a more powerful experience. Both modes have their pros and cons. Nonny's company that I'm the co-founder of uses both, but I'm going to talk today a bit more about volumetric. If the clicker works. All right, so you've all heard these words so many times by now, but I just want to just one more time quickly define, because some of this terminology is still a little indistinct. So presence, right? Everything, the whole concept that drives VR is presence, by which we mean, honestly, some input. You get some data input through your eyes and your ears, and it tricks your mind into feeling like you're somewhere else, right? There are much more complex definitions, and there are teams of neuroscientists working on this. It's a real academic discipline, but that's fundamentally what it's about, making someone feel present somewhere else, okay? The knock-on effect of that presence is empathy. For some reason, when you go into these kind of environments, you feel a super strong emotional reaction with the people that you see, the environments that you encounter. It creates a very strong empathetic response. If I'm feeling glib about it, and Nonny's never heard me say this, don't ever let me hear her, don't ever tell her I said this. So like, you know when you watch a movie on a plane, and you're more likely to cry because something about the atmosphere, am I the only one who's experienced this? Oh dear, okay, anyway, empathy, that's what empathy's about. Finally, spatial narratives. So, this is a very specific kind of thing that we try to do. You know, we are not advocating for using VR to take over all of the way in which news is communicated, but there are some kinds of stories that can be done in this medium as in no other. And the ones that really shine are stories where the physical dimensions of what happened, okay, the distance between the protagonists, the layout of a space where a crucial event happened is key to understanding the story, right? So if we can put you in that physical space and let you experience it for yourself, we can reach you in a whole other way. I'm going to quickly walk through my partner Nonny's very first piece that she made in Walk Around, just because it gives you a sense of how it works, and then I'll go through a few other key issues, and then I'll hand over to my colleagues. I've called this volumetric VR the prehistoric era. This actually was 2009, okay? Nonny was working at USC on a multimedia project the university was doing called Hunger in the Golden State, about hunger in California. And it was going to be, at that time, what we would have called a traditional multimedia project. Text, stills, videos, audio, etc. She had an intern working for her who was out in the field with a sound recorder, and the intern went to visit a food bank in downtown LA, and while she was there recording audio, a man who was standing in line, who was diabetic, went into a coma. His blood sugar got too low, he didn't get food in time, and he collapsed on the floor. And the intern just haphazardly happened to capture this audio. Came back to the lab, and something snapped in Nonny's mind to like, I can tell this story in this new medium that I've been thinking about, and it'll be a new way of conveying the sort of, the emotional power of what happened here. Her colleagues said she was crazy. She persevered. Took about 3 years and a lot of donated help from people at USC and people like Dan. But so here's a still image of the real event. Here is an image of the VR scene that she created. And I'm now going to play you a short video, which I think is very, very illustrative of one of the central qualities of this medium. So on the left side of the screen, you'll see what it's like to be inside that experience. After about 10 seconds on the right side, you'll see someone who's walking through it, and you'll see how he interacts with what's going on. So it's very illustrative from that point of view. Pop quiz. The man who's walking through the experience is an extremely successful, well-known movie director. You don't see his face, but I'm going to see if anyone in the audience recognizes him, and I'll ask you afterwards. All right? Yes.
There are too many people. There are too many people. Or somebody that's okay, he's having a seizure. Okay.
Need help. Yeah, we need ambulance. Somebody is his saliva is falling down right now.
Hurry up.
80. The crucis street is burn 1 and 8, and the Unitarian Church. The number of the building is 2936.
Okay,
The church. Oh Lord, help him.
it goes on a bit, so. Oops, hang on. Okay, so so you see what's going on there, right? Even though these are not remotely real characters, they look pretty primitive and crude, like crude animations. When he's in there, he is being super careful, like not to walk into people. He's bending down to examine the poor guy on the ground. He's kind of reacting as though he's really there. Oh, did anyone get who it was, by the way? Thank you. Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu. So, 2012, this piece went to the Sundance Film Festival, and Noni's crazy bet, everyone told her she was crazy, paid off, because time and again we saw the same response. People got down on their knees to try and help the man. They felt physically present in the space, and many came out like in tears or close to tears. So she established a few things, that you can do this, you can use this medium to tell essentially what we would loosely call, a documentary story, that presence really does generate this intense emotional response, and that it being an embodied experience, meaning your ability to actually move your own physical frame around inside the scenario, made it that much more immersive and more powerful. So that's really the foundation on which most of the work that we do is built. We've done a lot since then. I'm not going to go through every one because I don't have a little bit of time, but I'll just quickly cycle through 4 key ones so you'll get an idea of the kinds of topics that we're tackling. Project Syria was a recreation of an explosion in downtown Aleppo made for the World Economic Forum in 2014. We also sent a documentary crew to the border with Iraq to film a refugee camp there and put that into CG. Use of Force was based on an incident also in 2012 when US border guards beat an undocumented immigrant to death at the San Isidro border post, and 2 witnesses captured this on cell phones, so we turned that into an experience so you could sort of be there. One Dark Night recreates the night that Trayvon Martin was shot and killed by George Zimmerman. And Kia, which we made with Al Jazeera America, is a piece about domestic violence in South Carolina. It was also picked up, and we made that as a 360. It was picked up by the New York Times for their Sundance Up-Doc selection, which gave us a chance to turn it into a walk-around piece, which is very interesting to see that same story and experience it, in a 360 way and then in the walk-around way, to see the difference between the two formats. So, a few critical issues that we're going to want to discuss, I think, on the panel. 360 versus volumetric. As I said, each has its pros and cons. We work in both. My colleagues work in one or both. Worth discussing as to the role that each can play as this medium evolves. Evolution of hardware, I'll show you some pictures for that in a second. The ethics of recreations and simulations. Most of what we do is we take real-life events and as honestly and truthfully as we can, we stitch them back together. We sometimes have to use a little bit of poetic license in order to make the piece work. So where does that fit into a traditional journalistic ethical framework? Is a question that we talk about a lot. And lastly, when the pros and cons discussion is had about 360 video versus VR, one of the points often raised against the volumetric or the walk around is that those characters are so patently unreal. They look like pretty crude video game characters. What's exciting for us right now, what's happening right now, is that such advances are being made in the field of what we call both photogrammetry and videogrammetry, i.e. being able to capture still images of interiors and moving 3D images of real people, that pretty soon we're going to be able to make those kinds of pieces looking as if they were as real as a piece of 360 video. So that's pretty much it. Very quickly, right, this was the hardware we used to have to use. Dan also showed you this. So that's a funny little talking point, because this was another of Nonny's interns at the time. He duct taped this thing together himself for Sundance. He signed the bottom of it, and if you can read it close enough, it says Palmer Luckey. So that's who went on to found Oculus Rift. And there he is again. And the one point I'd like to make, all these 3 headsets that are released this year, that's the Oculus Rift, the HTC Vive, and the Sony PlayStation, which comes out in October, to different degrees, allow you to have a walk-around experience. So this stuff is not so very far away. It's kind of happening right now. This is the level of photorealism we can now achieve with scanned 3D characters, right? So it's really developing. But finally, and very quickly, just a few things that kind of spring to mind as optimal uses for volumetric. When you can't get a film crew in, which is often the case. Nonny's first piece, which he made in Second Life, was recreating Guantanamo Bay, when no one really had any idea what it looked like. No one could get access. So you can't always get a film crew in. In that case, what are you going to do? Again, spatial narratives. And her favorite example here, I assume a lot of you listen to the Serial podcast. Okay? One more time. No. Sorry, I used to be a musician, what can I say? So imagine being in that Best Buy parking lot, physically being there, and being able to see the dimensions and the distances and the angles, and be able to really sort of experience that story in a physical, spatial way. Interaction, Dan pointed to some of this stuff. You saw a guy using controllers. In that piece we did about the fatal beating by the border guards, for example, you were given a simulated cell phone and the ability to capture 60 seconds of footage, like capture the most incriminating footage you can if these agents were ever to be brought to trial. So adding that degree of interaction really increases people's engagement in the material. And again, past events, when there's no extant footage, this is a great way to go back and remake some of those. And I think that is it. Thank you very much.